What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Civivi Stormhowl. Really interesting button lock from Civivi, and being that it's a Civivi, it's going to be relatively budget friendly. This base model costs $75. Now I got it through a Going Gear subscription, so it's not like I was actively seeking this one out, but I'm very glad that they included it because Civivi is one of those brands that puts out so many models that I really don't follow them all that closely, so it's very possible I would have never even seen this one had it not been included in the box. And I think it's a very elegant looking knife overall. We'll start with the handles. We have these aluminum handles and available in a couple different colors. They have this nice milling pattern on them with the raised section being raw aluminum and the rest being anodized, and it creates a really slick effect. In the case of this colorway in particular, it has a very winter vibe to me, but overall I think just looks great. Good handle shape on it, ties together nicely, and the blade is a clip point style blade, which I'm a huge fan of. So overall, super good looking package in my opinion. Now in terms of size, this is going to be a pretty mid-sized knife at 7.64 inches overall. Get 4.34 inches of that in the handle, and incredibly ergonomic handle, locks in nicely. Get all four fingers on there, no hot spots whatsoever. Just kind of at a glance, one of the areas I was concerned about was the interior grip portion of this handle. It has kind of a weird mustache looking shape with a kind of protruding belly here, and I wasn't sure if that was going to feel weird in hand, but it doesn't really. I mean, I can tell that it's protruding a little bit, but still very comfortable. Now the jimping is very well placed and also super effective, locks your thumb into place nicely, and that's one area where I can be kind of nitpicky. I hate when it's like super tight jimping, it's all close together, not super grippy, it's almost just there for looks, but this one does lock in very nicely. In terms of the blade, we have that 3.3 inch clip point blade in Nitro-V steel with a flat grind. Very happy with that steel at this price point, and Civivi uses Nitro-V a lot and have never had any issues with it whatsoever. 3.13 inches on that cutting edge because of that kind of oversized sharpening choil. And so because that sharpening choil is so large, you can get up on this flipper tab and kind of creep up right behind that cutting edge if you'd like. Obviously be careful, you're pretty close to the edge, but I do find that kind of necessary for some knives. This isn't one of them. The reason I sometimes find that necessary is with these flipper tabs, sometimes they just kind of place you so far back behind the blade that it just feels off. You feel like you're too far behind the blade and you don't have as much control as when you're choked right up on top of it. With this one, I don't really find that being an issue so much. Now, it's also a relatively thin blade where we have a blade stock of 0.10 inches thick. Wouldn't have minded seeing that be a little bit thicker just to give the blade a little bit more momentum. This is still a very light knife overall, 3.04 ounces, so great blade to weight ratio there. But I wouldn't have minded seeing some extra weight in that blade just to, I think it would be a little bit more satisfying, a little bit better drop on it, but still pretty great action on here. The defining feature here is probably going to be obviously that button lock, and it's done very well. I'd say an 8.5 out of 10. Leaps and bounds better than my early button locks from Civivi, so they've definitely dialed it in over the last couple years. If I were going to criticize anything with it though, it does have kind of a spongy feel to me. You can feel the spring kind of resisting as you press it. You also have to travel pretty far in order for it to disengage, and so what that means is you have to make sure you're keeping enough pressure on that until it's fully closed before you let go, because otherwise it will kind of stop in its track, and we can show what that looks like there. And so a lot of times you just don't think about it and you're not pressing down as hard as you could be, and it just stops closing. And I think with a little bit of a heavier blade, that might kind of negate some of that effect, and also just less travel on the button. When I think about my favorite button locks, they do not have that issue. So that's going to be ProTech, kind of the gold standard for button locks. These are obviously significantly more expensive, so expected they're going to be a little bit better. But one thing about ProTechs is that there's very little travel on the button, and you don't really feel the spring resistance at all. It's basically engaged until it's not. As soon as that you press down, it clicks and just kind of drops shut. It's a very satisfying action. And this is also a little bit of a thicker blade stock, and so it just really kind of snaps it shut, keeps this momentum. You can see these are pretty similar sized knives overall. And again, that's true for any of the ProTechs, not just the Malibu. I actually find the Mordax to have an even better action because of the weight of that blade. And so a budget option or a budget alternative would be something like the Kaiser Assassin. This one has a great button. The Stormhowl's action is probably a little bit better though. And so the button on this one, it kind of pops up when the blade is open. but it doesn't have to travel very far and you don't feel the spring, so super smooth. The issue with this one is it's so smooth and just kind of so loose that there's a lot of bounce, and a lot of times it'll bounce open like this, and you just have to really figure out the timing in order for it to fully close. And sometimes it looks like it's closed, but it's not quite there, and so the flipper tab doesn't work as well because it's obviously not engaged with that detent. And so the action on this one's not quite as good as the Stormhowl. The button's just a hair better. The acoustics on the Stormhowl are also a little bit better. I don't know, I've probably been talking over this one. Has kind of a funky sound to me. I'm not sure what it is about it, but it has kind of a funky sound. But the Stormhowl sounds very nice. The flipper tab on here is great. The detent is just about perfect. If it were a little bit heavier, it might be better, but I don't have any issues with filling this. You can see there's some jimping on the all the way around that flipper tab actually, and it is super snappy and responsive. So I wouldn't have minded a slightly heavier detent, but it feels very good. And so overall, really happy with that button lock action, because the early Civivis were ones that I just wasn't that excited about. I like the knives, but wasn't a huge fan of the early button locks. So glad they were able to dial that in. The rest of the knife, no lanyard hole, but we do have a reversible deep carry pocket clip. And I like Civivi style pocket clips. You see this on a lot of their knives. Nothing offensive about it. Super deep carry. They're not super stout, and that is sitting right on that pattern, so it might be a little bit of a gene destroyer. Another thing that I really like, just kind of looking at it now, is that we have T8 body screws as well as pivot screws. The pocket clip is T6, but the body and the pivot are T8. Also, the kind of filler screw over here is a T8, but the ones that are actually attaching that pocket clip are T6. No plug on that pocket clip hole. I don't mind it so much. I think it still looks great, and so wouldn't have minded seeing a plug there for sure, but it also would look kind of out of place because it would be interrupting that milling pattern anyway. So, I mean, if you're not going to have it, it's perfectly fine. And then the button texture is also nice. You can see it's got kind of a circle target looking texture to it, which looks pretty nice. It's pretty subtle, not super noticeable. We have the Civivi pivot here with the tooled backside. And so yeah, overall really happy with this. I think for $75 this is a great button lock. I think one of the better budget alternative to the Protex. Obviously the Protex are on a whole nother level, but you're paying a lot more than you're going to be paying for this. I still find them to be pretty affordable, but not necessarily a budget knife. And so I think this is a great option for that. It is on bearings as well, which yeah, it feels super smooth. I think you feel that a lot more on the opening than the closing. And again, that's because you have to make sure you're putting enough pressure on that button for it to close. Otherwise, it starts to disengage or re-engage that lock, and it adds some resistance, making it feel a little bit slower, but it definitely feels butter smooth on that opening. Would love to hear your thoughts on this one down in the comments below. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or joining the channel as a member. I will link this in the description. If it's somewhere that I have an affiliate link, that helps out at no additional cost to you, but I of course will link it anyway, even if I don't have an affiliate link. So I haven't actually checked yet who has this in stock. But thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one, and take care.